Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. A new cringeworthy interview in connection with the Alec Baldwin shooting case is coming up. But first, the New York Times did a massive hit piece this weekend on the police. The article, entitled "Why Many Police Traffic Stops Turn Deadly," argued that police cross the line during traffic incidents based on a fear of danger on the part of the police officers. The article highlighted fatal traffic stops over the last 5 years where drivers or passengers who were not wielding a gun or a knife were fatally shot by police. And it is filled with loaded language and skewed statistics. For example, they want to make sure you know it was the officer's fault for pulling these cars over at all. Quote, "Many stops began with common traffic violations like broken taillights or running a red light." Yeah, that is exactly how officers every day stop or discover more significant crimes. Continues, "Motorists were often resistant or evasive. Some had been hiding illegal drugs or weapons. Others had outstanding warrants." And then that more than 3/4 of the unarmed motorists were killed while attempting to flee. Now, the Times asserted that this is all proof of a failed justice system when it comes to cops. The recurrence of such cases and the rarity of convictions both follow from an overstatement ingrained in court precedents and police culture of the danger that vehicle stops pose to officers, claiming a sense of mortal peril. So it is the officers' fault that they risk their lives every day and fear getting their heads blown off by bad guys. The article goes on to say, quote, "In case after case, officers said they had feared for their lives, and in case after case, prosecutors declared the killings of unarmed motorists legally justifiable." The Times reviewed video and audio recordings, prosecutor statements, court documents finding patterns of questionable police conduct that went beyond recent high-profile deaths of unarmed drivers. First of all, the New York Times assessment of questionable police conduct should never mean that someone gets convicted of a crime. Now, let me pause here for a second and be clear. There are cases of police misconduct that do not make national headlines. They are real and they are problematic. Cops should not shoot at a fleeing suspect. There are some bad players out there, and there are cops who go too far, and they should be held accountable. But when the Times places the blame on the cops in this way, you know it's a hit job. Quote, "Officers regularly and unnecessarily place themselves in danger by standing in front of fleeing vehicles or reaching inside car windows, then fired their weapons in what they later said was self-defense." You know, the last time I checked, when an officer stands in front of a car, whether it's good policy or not, he or she should not expect to get run over. The piece analyzed all fatal incidents in the last 5 years, starting by pointing out that police have killed more than 5,000 civilians this year, but then broke down those deaths. They said, quote, "Many died during felonies in progress, home invasions, domestic violence, calls, or shootouts in the streets." No recognition of the heroism involved in some of those situations. The article repeatedly talked about how statistically safe traffic stops are for officers, and then offered anecdotes about people killed by police. But not once did they offer anecdotes with details on the other side about the officers who were murdered or wounded during a routine traffic stop. According to the FBI, officers killed in the line of duty has increased 51% this year compared to last year, but that didn't quite fit with the narrative. Join us now is one of the experts interviewed in the New York Times article, Michael Gennaco, who is a recognized expert on law enforcement and reform, as well as accountability. Thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it. I want to discuss what you were quoted saying in the article, and I want to make sure that you feel the context was appropriate, et cetera. You were quoted saying prosecutors and courts give more leeway to officers' decisions to use force at vehicle stops as a result of the exaggerated concern about the potential for officers getting hurt. Why do you use the word exaggerated concern?
I think that because of the way in which officers are exposed to the information about the safety or lack thereof of traffic stops, it does exaggerate the concern about there is a real concern. Every traffic stop has some potential risk. But I think that some of the training and some of the briefings that officers are exposed to does exaggerate that concern.
Well, but would you say the same thing, for example, about pilots, right? When they're trained about a possible crash, et cetera, they're trained on sort of worst case scenarios, right? They're trained to protect their lives, to save their lives, et cetera. And I would think it's good policy on the part of police training to warn rookie officers, et cetera, there's a real danger. Every time you pull over a vehicle, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. And in particular, when you want to train them for potential conflict as well, and sure, de-escalation is the goal, but this notion that somehow, and I have to tell you, I was particularly bothered, not at you, at the New York Times, when they said many of the fatal vehicle stops reviewed by the Times unfolded in a similar way. Officers acted as if their lives were in constant peril and killed drivers who failed to obey orders. They acted as if their lives were in constant peril. Well, when someone is not obeying orders in a traffic stop, it can get ugly and it can make you very nervous as a police officer, no?
Absolutely. There is no question that that's one of the indicia that officers definitely need to be aware of. And if somebody is not going with the program or slow to go to the program, that should heighten the threat and concern of any officer approaching a vehicle. The question then is, what do you do about it? And consistent with that, just in the same way that pilots are trained to perform safely, officers should also be trained in the same way. So, for example, when that happens, the last thing an officer should be doing is reaching into a vehicle, because that only increases the potential danger to that officer. So I'm not suggesting that officers should be aware of their surroundings and should be aware of how any individual is responding to them or not as part of that calculus. The question is, but I think then is, what do you do about it?
Right. I think that's fair to say that, officers should be trained in a particular way, trained not to shoot at a fleeing suspect, et cetera, of course. But when it comes to something like putting your hand in a window, et cetera, when you're there and it's happening in real time and you're nervous and someone's not obeying your orders and you're afraid of what they may do next, the Times seems to be suggesting these people should all be prosecuted for murder because it ended up in someone dying. And I think that just ignores the reality of being a police officer having to make split-second decisions.
Prosecution is sort of the nuclear option here with regard to officers who are trained and required to wear a weapon in order to do their job. They've got that gun strapped onto their hip every day, and they have to. That being said, there are other options that are available and sometimes go unheeded with regard to additional training or a discipline. Sometimes officers just don't have the right kind of level of confidence to continue to do their job. But taking freedom away from them in a prosecution, I think that's appropriately reserved for the rare case.
So would you agree with me then that the Times's call, and it was numerous times in the article, for this notion that, these people aren't being prosecuted, look at how few cases are being prosecuted, et cetera, was overkill on the part of the New York Times?
I wouldn't go that far. I'm just saying that I as an expert and a former prosecutor of police officers, by the way, agree that it's a rare case in which the prosecutor standard is met.
Were you bothered by the article? I mean, when you looked at it in its totality, did you say you think this is a fair portrayal?
I think the article makes some good and valid points. And I think the whole data thing is a real problem because here's the thing. Because the data is so insufficient on a granular and on a global scale, the media outlets, including the New York Times, Washington Post, and others, have had to fill in that gap. And that's unfortunate.
Well, that's true, but what I was concerned about is not the data. The Washington Post has an ongoing, database now of police shootings, and people can interpret it in different ways, et cetera. I was bothered by the way that the New York Times claimed to have seen all this information and claimed to then draw these conclusions about what should or shouldn't be done implicitly. I mean, this was an article that was calling for the prosecution of more police officers. There was no way to view it any other way. And again, as I said at the outset, that's okay if you've got the evidence in specific cases to say this was overwhelming, et cetera, but they're drawing these grand conclusions about hundreds of cops out there who, in effect, ought to have been prosecuted, and you seem to agree with me that that is the nuclear option and that we need to be very, very careful when talking about prosecuting cops. You get the final word.
Of course, and I think that that option is and should be available, and I do think that there are times in which the evidence has been there, or lesser kinds of prosecutions, and short of murder, like involuntary manslaughter, are often, those levers are often not pushed in the right case, but there needs to be a balance, clearly.
Well, and again, I would argue even for involuntary manslaughter, the standard better be pretty darn high in terms of when you're going to prosecute a cop. But again, I think we all believe in accountability because it's good for the cops, it's good for the communities when there is behavior that is egregious. But I think that anyone who goes out there and reads this article from the New York Times fairly and carefully, when they say things like officers acted as if their lives were in constant peril, as if these officers are faking it, will tell you that it is not a fair portrayal, I don't think, of what is happening with policing in America. But I appreciate, look, you've been nuanced about this. You've been intellectually consistent, and I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. And to the good of the New York Times, at least it has furthered this very important discussion, and I appreciate your views.
Thank you. Coming up, there is a big vote tomorrow in Minneapolis on defunding and eliminating their police department. It may pass, but you know who does not support it? African-American residents of Minneapolis. That's coming up. Tomorrow, voters in Minneapolis have a major issue to decide: whether to get rid of their police department. The proposal, called City Question 2, would replace the Minneapolis Police Department with a new, quote, Department of Public Safety under the control of the mayor and city council. But you know who doesn't like it? The city's black residents. A recent poll from the Star Tribune newspaper, Minnesota Public Radio, and others asked likely voters in Minneapolis if they supported replacing the police department. 49% said they supported it, while 41% opposed it. Among African-American voters in the city, more people, 47% opposing, with 42% in support of replacing the police department. And get this, when asked, do you think Minneapolis should or should not reduce the size of its police force, 75% of black Minneapolis residents said they should not, compared to 51% of whites, a full 75%. Black residents do not want to see their department shrink in size. The proposal says the new department could include police officers, so maybe. But the minimum police funding requirement would be eliminated from the city charter. That is otherwise known as defunding the police. But the ballot measure doesn't use the word defund, so the city council can pretend that isn't what they're doing. Democrats in Minnesota, including Representatives Ilhan Omar and Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, support the measure, as do many community leaders who may not necessarily be representing the people they claim to speak for. Joining us now is attorney Shaka Johnson. He previously also worked as a police detective. Shaka, thanks very much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. I know you've been following this ballot referendum question very closely. Any sense of why you think it's so unpopular among black residents?
Well, I think that, first of all, thank you for having me once again, Dan. I think that it's very unpopular to a sort of an alarming amount amongst black residents because typically, a lot of the higher crimes, the property crimes, the violent crimes are happening in areas that are minority heavy. And so when you're talking about defunding the police and perhaps taking some of the militant nature out of policing and making it a more public health oriented institution, I can absolutely see why you'd have people who are the less, the more disenfranchised population, the ones who are statistically more likely to be the victims of violent crimes, the victim of property crimes, Part 1 index sort of crimes, I could see why they would say, listen, we still want a police force. We may not want the police force to behave themselves in the way in which they were previously, but we still find a need for proper policing in our community.
And the word defund isn't actually used as part of the ballot measure, which I think is such a clever way of trying to pretend they're not defunding. They're just sort of restricting, taking away the guaranteed funding, et cetera. And they're talking about all of the other issues, mental health services, homeless outreach, et cetera, which, by the way, is all great. I mean, there's no problem with that if you have the funds, right? The point is, and you know this as a former cop, you get a call of someone holding a knife, walking down the street, and let's say it's someone that they know has mental health issues. You can't just send out a mental health expert if it's someone who has mental health issues and also may be violent.
Well, the issue, I think, is we've run away with this term defund because I guess it just sort of grew legs and we just allowed it to. But the reality of it is when people are saying defund, there's a portion of that population who mean what defund really, I think, means, which is reallocate. Now, I don't think that people are saying we should reallocate and start to view crime or crime suppression as a public health crisis, but there are portions there. I can tell you this, and I think you know this as well, Dan. There are portions of the criminal underworld that the law and the court system have begun to view as a public health crisis. For example, the opioid epidemic and the resurgence of heroin, et cetera. That's being viewed as a public health crisis.
I don't think any police officers, and you tell me because you're a former cop, are going to be upset about the idea of someone saying there's a drug overdose and the police not having to go deal with that, right? I am confident that they will be pleased about not having to deal with those particular types of calls so they can focus on the real work that they need to do every day. But you know what this requires? Funding. It requires money.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm saying, I'm with you. I agree with you 100%. And that's why I believe that we've allowed this to sort of get larger than life. And what people, I believe the people who really meant well when this began were really talking about reallocating money, resourcing money to maybe more community-oriented policing initiatives and things like that. Not defunding the police, taking away police from our neighborhoods.
I think, and maybe I'm wrong, I will not be surprised at all if, despite the fact that the latest poll said 49% support, 41% are opposed, I would not be surprised if this ballot does not pass. We shall see.
I would not be surprised either.
The polls suggest I'm wrong, but we shall see. Shaka Johnson, if you can stick around for us, because we want to check in back with you a little bit later about an explosive new interview related to the shooting on the set of the Alec Baldwin movie Rust. We'll be checking in with you on that. But coming up, most polling pointing to a dead heat in Virginia's governor race. Terry McAuliffe and Glenn Youngkin neck and neck in the governor's race. But what do these polls really mean? How accurate are they really? Coming up. Less than 24 hours from the polls closing in Virginia's governor's race. Joe Biden won the state by double digits in 2020. Recent polling shows the race between the Democrat, Terry McAuliffe, and Republican Glenn Youngkin is neck and neck. A recent Roanoke College poll of more than 570 likely Virginia voters shows McAuliffe holding a 1% lead over Youngkin, but a recent Fox News poll had Youngkin up by 8. So what do we make of these conflicting polls? Most would say the race is considered a statistical tie, with polling averages from 538 and Real Clear Politics, with both showing Youngkin holding slim leads of less than 2 points, well within the average margin of error. Additionally, the Cook Political Report has the race pegged as a toss-up, and a recent Emerson College Nexstar media poll shows the race tied as well. But the momentum may be on Youngkin's side. Since September, Youngkin has seen a 3% spike in support, according to the Emerson Nexstar polls. Not only has Youngkin grown more popular among Virginians, McAuliffe's number has slipped, albeit by just 1%. Additionally, the Roanoke College poll shows Youngkin is more popular with independents than McAuliffe, leading the former governor with unaffiliated voters by a whopping 11%. That's a big one. Former President Donald Trump could be a key factor, with McAuliffe trying to tie Youngkin to Trump. The former president is pretty unpopular in the Commonwealth. The Roanoke College poll found 54% of Virginia voters have an unfavorable view of Trump. Meanwhile, half of those polled also disapprove of the job President Biden's doing. But Biden has a 44% approval rating compared to Trump's 37%. But that hasn't kept the ex-president from entering the fray. Trump has endorsed Youngkin several times, despite the candidate seeming to try to keep the former president at arm's length throughout the campaign. Meanwhile, McAuliffe has tried to seize on Trump's unpopularity in Virginia, constantly trying to tie Youngkin to the ex-president with ads like this.
Glenn Youngkin, he'll straighten out Virginia, do all of the things that we want a governor to do. We're going to take it all back, take back Virginia.
Today, Trump is hosting what's being called a tele-rally for Youngkin, though the candidate said to the media that he won't attend the event, wasn't involved in its planning. So with less than 24 hours to go, I still want to get a sense of where things really stand, probably like all of you. Joining us now to discuss is Patrick Murray, director of the Polling Institute at Monmouth University. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. All right. So let me ask you, with these wide variety of results coming out, 8 points for Youngkin on Fox. Today we see a new poll, 1 point for McAuliffe. How accurate are these polls, and who do you think has the edge tonight?
Well, it depends on what you mean by the word accurate. I think the problem that we've run into is that the media in particular tend to think of these polls as crystal balls. And polls do best when they explain what the here and now is, not when they try to venture into a prediction of what the future might hold. So I think in general, polls always have some sort of error involved with it. It's just the way it goes. And the polling right now is suggesting going into this race, just as you said in introducing this segment, is that it's a close race with the momentum seeming to go in Youngkin's way over the past couple of weeks. And that's exactly what I think, is going on. Now, whether that's enough for Youngkin to win, I don't know, but the polls are saying that this is a race that could end up being very close because of a swing that the polls actually showed us, if you go back and look at them, happened right after that last debate, the second debate between the two candidates at the very end of September. That seemed to be the pivot point where Youngkin was able to kind of change the dynamic of this race and gain that momentum.
I got to ask you, you mentioned that polls are not crystal balls, but the bottom line is if we weren't looking at polls to help us predict what was going to happen, polls probably wouldn't get a whole lot of attention. Right? I understand that you guys do a lot more than that. And I understand that from your perspective that, you wish that people focused on a lot of other issues. But the bottom line is, and you say the media, but, that is very often what drives polls to occur, et cetera, is media interest on where things stand in an election, right?
Right. They love the horse race part of it. And in fact,
right.
Some of the major pollsters in this country, like Marist and Quinnipiac, didn't do any polls in these races this year. I think some of us are really rethinking whether we should be part of that, because that's not really what we're designed to do. It's interesting to do, but I think after we had a failure in 2020. There's no question about it. And so some of us are questioning whether it's worth it, because the other stuff that we do with polling, such as telling us what's going on with the pandemic, are really good. So why would we undermine our credibility to go out and try to venture into things where we're not actually, the polling is just not designed to do it all that accurately.
But you still do it anyway.
Last thing I did, so I did Virginia a couple weeks ago because this is where the race stands now, but who knows where it's going, and it's a tight race, and that's what we know.
Right. And look, and that's why someone like me who's looking at polls, I love polls for the exact reason you hate them, right? I'm looking for the crystal ball. I'm looking for someone to tell me when I see a poll with Youngkin up by 8 a week earlier, even less than a week, and then I see another poll with McAuliffe up by 1, I say that there's something wrong here, which is why people tend to look at the average of polls and why they tend to look at momentum, et cetera. So look, I think that in the end, what you are telling us without telling us is that if you were a betting man, you'd be betting on Youngkin. But you're not going to tell us.
No, I'm not sure I'm betting. What I'm saying is, rather than look at the average, I would look at the range. No, look at the range of the polls. So you got Fox from 8 points for Youngkin to maybe a tie, maybe McAuliffe by 1 point. I think that's somewhere in that range is probably realistically what's going to happen.
Fair enough. Patrick Murray, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
Up next, a suspect being transported for his day in court. He may be in a wheelchair, but that doesn't stop him from wrestling an officer to the ground and grabbing his gun. That's coming up. Time for our police cam segment showing the dangers law enforcement officers face every day around the country. We're about to see what happened last week when a sheriff's deputy brought a suspect into a courthouse in Illinois. A corrections officer was transferring the suspect, Frederick Goss, from a car to a wheelchair. Jury selection was set to begin in his armed robbery trial. The officer removed Goss's handcuffs since he wasn't supposed to appear in court wearing restraints. When the officer went to adjust the wheelchair's leg supports, Goss grabbed the officer's gun. As they rolled onto the floor, Goss was able to take the weapon out of the officer's holster. Investigators say a round was fired in the struggle but missed both men. Another deputy saw it on surveillance cameras, rushed in. Goss pointed the gun at the deputy, who shot Goss. He threw the gun away and was taken to the hospital. Neither officer was injured. Joining us now to break it down is Sean Sticks-Larkin, retired Tulsa Police Lieutenant, my former Live PD co-host. Sean, good to see you. So the officer uncuffs the suspect, bends over to adjust the wheelchair's leg support. That's when the suspect grabs the officer's gun. Now, this is a guy who had been charged with armed robbery, and an important factor that we should have included is that he'd already been shot by police during his arrest in June. Officers knew they were dealing with someone very dangerous.
Exactly, and that's something I was going to point out is, this guy is an armed career criminal. He was, at the time of the armed robbery that happened in June, he is actually on federal probation for being caught with a firearm years earlier, and he was sentenced to federal prison because he was what they call an armed career criminal. So yes, during the armed robbery back in June, he commits an armed robbery. Or allegedly committed an armed robbery, ends up in a gun battle with police where he is shot then. So there was probably some poor officer safety, techniques that went on during the moving him out of the car and into the wheelchair. Some things that agency obviously will need to look at what could have done better. But not to get too political here, but one of the things we talk about obviously is the defunding the police. We've seen mass amounts of officers and deputies that are retiring or leaving this profession. There's difficulty getting guys hired. This is the type of thing that happens when you only have one correctional officer or deputy available to move a guy. It puts him in a disadvantage. Even though this guy's in a wheelchair, you see he still gets the deputy's gun.
Well, here's the good news, Sean, about the political side of it. We just did a defund the police segment already. So it's not going to be anything new to the audience watching the show.
That is
now,
true.
The interesting thing to me was that another deputy saw it, and you see him come in there. He's watching on the monitor, and he comes in and kind of saves the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I said, you've got a career criminal. The guy's already been in a gun battle previously with police. Something I've always said, if somebody's trying to fight an officer for their gun, they're not trying to take it for a souvenir. There's a reason that guy wanted to get that gun. Obviously, a shot went off during the struggle that the two, the original deputy and the suspect had. So, honestly, that deputy is very, very lucky that he's alive, in my opinion, because another deputy was close by that was able to come in and stop him as a threat.
Yep. Sean Larkin, thank you. Good to see you. See you soon. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.